Hello, and welcome to Tuesdays with Thom. I'm Thom, of course, and I want to thank you all for joining us. Now, what's Tuesdays with Thom all about? People have been asking me. Well, we want it to be an hour or so of long show of entertainment, news, sports, and definitely some opinion. And some of that opinion, what I'd like to bring with you on TWT, we call it, is some intelligent, fact-based positive about issues that are facing us today. So let me put this out there from the beginning. All right. You can send us messages through our Facebook page. But what we do on Tuesdays is have fun. And those of you who know me know that I like to have fun. What we're not going to do on Tuesdays is be demeaning, spew hate, call names. So if you want to argue about this politician and that politician or call people names, this isn't the place for it. I'm sure you can find many outlets for that kind of noise. I had a second grade teacher named Mrs. Jackson. Mrs. Jackson always told us that empty barrels make the most noise. So if your barrel is empty and you feel you need to make some noise, then find somewhere else to do it. But our goal is to be thought-provoking. In other words, we're going to use that matter that we got in our heads to have some fun, to look at some issues, and we can disagree, but we will not be disagreeable. So it's so easy today to be against something rather than to be for something. And I can't tell you how disappointing it is to see friends and people I've been friendly with belittle themselves by calling names and spewing hate just so they can get a like on Facebook. So, okay, I'm done preaching. So let me again welcome you to the show. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the COVID virus and sports, and I got a special guest, a good friend of mine that I think you're going to enjoy. You know, throughout this virus period, we've all had to adjust. I've traveled all my life. I haven't been anywhere since March 8th. I've been home since March 8th. I think my wife would like it if I went somewhere, maybe just for a little while, a few days, go somewhere, but I'm not going anywhere. So some shout outs before we get into the show. I'd like to shout out to the citizens of Louisiana affected by Hurricane Laura. We send you our prayers and we send you our love. And I've been there. And if you've been hit by a hurricane, you know it's a long, long road to recovery. To those people who attended the virtual Southeastern Diversity Matter Symposium hosted by the Auburn College of Vet Medicine this past weekend, it was absolutely wonderful. We at Best Girl were lucky to have a part of it. So I want to thank Dean Calvin Johnson, Dr. Sarah Lynn Smith-Carr, Beth Williford, Silas Z., from the vet school, and all the attendees had about 80 people from around the Southeast, different vet schools. And a special shout out to Dean Ruby Perry from Tuskegee University, who was honored by that organization. And she is a wonderful human being who has given so much to so many. And I also want to give a shout out to my good friend, Dr. Mary Rudisil, who is chair of the kinesiology department in the College of Education at Auburn. Mary gave a how-to presentation on successful diversity recruiting of both students and faculty. And anybody who is in doubt, anybody who says they can't figure it out, they need to get in touch with Mary Rudisil or Jared Russell in the kinesiology department at the College of Auburn, because they figured it out and it works very well. A couple of other shout outs, actor and movie star hero Chadwick Boseman, who's not only a hero on the screen, but a hero in life, who weathered for cancer in the fourth stage to bring a lot of children, a lot of young adults, and older adults as well. And then to former Georgetown basketball coach, Big John Thompson, who passed away. He was the first African-American coach to win the NCAA national championship, and his teams played an aggressive, hustling style of basketball that I've always appreciated. And then finally, but certainly worthy, is a shout out to Mr. Harold Franklin, the first African-American student to attend Auburn University. And finally, after 50 years, he received his master's degree, which he was prevented from getting when he went to Auburn, primarily because of racism. So let me move forward, and I'd like to introduce my two semi-permanent guests, Barbara Wallace Edwards and Mychal Walker. And later in the show, we're going to have Big D, Daryl Braden, come talk to us about his new book. So let me just introduce Barbara first. Barbara is a native of Mobile, Alabama. She grew up there with her 5 siblings, and they were always encouraged by her parents to be of service to others. And I can testify that Barbara has taken that lesson to heart, because if you've got a project that advocates for those less fortunate, you will find Barbara there, especially if it involves children and young adults. In addition, she is a singer. I didn't know that until recently. And I witnessed her singing a guest soloist at a church. And maybe we get Barbara to sing on the show sometime for us. How about that, Barbara?
I'm not sure about that, Thom. I'm not sure if we might lose some guests as a result of me singing on the show. But good morning to you. How are you?
I'm doing very well. And how are you?
I'm doing fine. Hi, like you know, I'm used to traveling all the time, and with this pandemic, everything's kind of come to a screeching halt as far as travel is concerned. No family reunions this summer, no real summer vacations. Got a chance to go over to Atlanta a couple of times, and during my last trip over there, I actually was involved in a car accident. So that time, I've been visiting doctors and physical therapists and trying to get everything worked out, and hopefully within maybe another month or so, I'll have everything back.
Well, we certainly hope so. I know that that's not any fun. And then Mychal Walker. Mychal hails originally from Cleveland, Ohio, I think, grew up in Auburn, Alabama, and now lives in Atlanta, Georgia. Mychal is president of the Walker Agency, a full-service insurance brokerage. He specializes in commercial lines, insurance for property and businesses, as well as health and life insurance for the under 65 market. I guess that includes me. Let's see. He's the past president. What y'all laughing for? He's the past president of the Georgia Association of Health Underwriters, and he's the current chair of the National Association of Health Underwriters Political Action Committee. And I have to throw this in. Mychal and I go back to our South Central Bell South days. Matter of fact, we've got a story to tell about that. And so, Mychal, first of all, tell me what's happening in your world.
Well, good morning, Thom. Good morning, Barbara, and good morning to Daryl and all our guests. I'll tell you what's happening in my world. Being in fact that I'm in the insurance business, as you mentioned, we're now coming up on what's called annual enrollment for Medicare, open enrollment for people that have health-based insurance through their employers. And then in November, we have enrollment for individuals that have healthcare.gov or ACA, affectionately known as Obamacare. So with this being an election year, healthcare is front and center. And because of COVID-19, everybody's health is of foremost importance.
Okay, thank you. You want to tell our South Central Bell South story? You want me to tell it, or you want to just let it go?
Well, we both can tell it,
Well, I'll start off. How about that?
That's fine.
Mychal, I was working at South Central Bell, and I'd only been there for a couple of years, and I got into management recruiting. And this young man comes to the office, and I mean, he's outstanding. He's wonderful. And the young man is Mychal. And so I interviewed him, and I thought, oh, wow, man, this guy's perfect. He's the guy we need. And I'll let you pick it up from there, and then I'll tell you what, I'll end it. What happened when it got back to me.
Well, what happened was I was given the opportunity to interview with South Central Bell in 3 different positions. One was public relations, one was marketing, and one was corporate communications. And it was interesting that I never got to interview for public relations. Back in those days, we were told to show up at least 10 to 15 minutes early. If not, you would be late. So when I went for that interview, I showed up about 15 minutes early. I checked in at the front desk. The secretary said that the person that was going to interview me would be in soon. And as I sat there waiting for him, I saw this gentleman walk out from behind her desk. He was in the office behind her, and he walked down the hall, turned around, stuck his head in somebody's door, and then walked back past me. And then within 5 minutes, she told me that my interview had been canceled. I never got that interview, and I think I know why. The other opportunity I had was to go to corporate communications, where they did their radio, TV, and in-house productions. And the interesting thing about that, upon my interview with him, the guy said, "How far do you want to go in Bell South's corporate communications department?" And I said, "I'm not quite sure what avenues are available." He said, "Well, given your experience and what you've done, one would think you want to ascend to the office of president." So I looked at him and I simply said, "I only want to go as far as my hard work and capabilities take me. If it takes me to the office of president, then let me be president. If not, I'll be happy serving in a position that is optimal, that would be viewed by such with the company." And then my final interview was with marketing. And I had an interview in November, December. Thom called me up and told me, he said, "Well, Mychal, you passed all the assessment tests. You did great on the interview. And Thom, I'll let you take it from there."
Well, you did great on the interview, and it was the guy called me up who had the job and said, "This guy's wonderful. He is fantastic. We have to have him in our organization." And I said, "Well, great. You want to get together and talk about what we're going to offer?" And so he said, "Well, I don't want to hire him right now. I want to wait till we get a black slide, and I can put him in." So I don't want to waste one of my black slides by bringing him in right now. And so I went back and told, I came and told you, it's like, "Hey man, I've only been here a couple of years. I can't do anything about it," but it all worked out in the end. But that was, people condemn what they call affirmative action, but that was what it was like. So let's move on. And let's go to what I call Tuesday's topic. And our topic today is sports and the virus. And I don't know if you saw it yesterday, but I saw a march by the University of Alabama's team, and with Coach Nick Saban leading the march. And I thought people had signs, people lined up along the road, and it was all Black Lives Matter. And I thought the thing that was most interesting to me was, I always read the comments, and I mean, there were tons and tons and tons of comments, and I only saw one or two that were negative. Most of them were positive, were in praise of what they were doing, and so and understanding, I think, what they were doing. So here's my question to Barbara and Mychal. So as we go into this football season, and the virus is not dissipating, it is not going to disappear. It's not going to be magic and it's gone. Should they play, or will they play?
Well,
I'll start, Thom. I think they probably will play. I don't think they should play, because I'm really concerned about the health of those young people. You know, not just their immediate, but long term. No one knows the effect, the impact that this virus is going to have on, the health of individuals in the future. And so, we're talking about people's livelihoods and their lives. It's just not fair to the students.
Okay,
Mychal.
Well, to answer your first question, should they play? Well, that's a very difficult question to answer. If you err on the side of judgment, the answer would be no, because of the unknowns, as Barbara has mentioned, and the fact that at this point, we don't have a vaccine or anything like that to even protect them. Will they play? I would say they probably will. Reason being is that the other side of it is, it's the economics that's involved. In addition to that, you're talking about athletes, people that maybe have been at, say, Auburn in particularly, for 3 years, and this is their senior year, and it may be a breakout year for them. Maybe their last shot to get to the NFL, and now COVID is hit. I'm sure they want to play. The same with an incoming freshman who's just making the team and may have an opportunity to start as a freshman. They want to play. There's a lot of different dynamics in there where people will want to take a calculated risk.
I guess from my opinion, going back to my days and playing college football, if I was diagnosed with sickle cell trait going into my senior year, and it was the Tuesday before our first game. And so the first game was in Birmingham. And so I was asked to leave campus on Tuesday and to travel to Birmingham, and checked into the hospital and actually stayed in the hospital until Friday, because it was feared that I actually had sickle cell disease. And a guy, I think it may have been Oklahoma, but an athlete had died in Oklahoma, I think it was. And it was the first time that sickle cell came to the forefront, and it was a disease that primarily affected Blacks. And so it turns out I had to trade. You know, I think if I'm 18, 19 years old, and particularly going to my senior year, yeah, I want to play. I think, as you said, Mychal, and you know, it's such a complicated issue. And but what I will say is, if a kid doesn't play, then, man, you know, they practice year round. It gives him an opportunity to get his body healed and strong for the combine, for the next year. It gives, you know, generally from the time they're in the ninth grade, it's a year-round thing for them. It wasn't for us. We got the summer off, and you got to let your body heal. And so I think, and I agree about the economics, and I think that's the driving force right now. And so it's going to be I think they'll start to play. Whether they get through the season or not is going to be what will be the test. And what kind of season will this be? It'll always be marked in history as the COVID season. What happened? How many games you'll play? Where we'll go from there. Let me let anybody got any other comments? I want to talk about the NBA and the one-game strike, but go ahead before we get to that.
Well, I just like to make one other comment. When you talk about the bodies and letting them heal, I concur and agree with you 100%. That's why I am not in favor of spring football. You know, some of the conferences are talking about playing spring football. Well, if you play spring football and go through an 8 or 9 game season, then you have a few months off, and then it starts summer camp all over to try to get back on track for fall. So if you're going to delay it and go to spring, you might as well just cancel the whole season. Just my opinion.
I would agree with that. Barbara, you got any thoughts on that?
I agree totally. Again, you know, I still say no one knows the long-term effects this illness is going to have on these young people. So they're taking a real risk here. And it may even be a liability for the universities and the conferences in the long run. You know, we're talking maybe possibly class actions in the future. So I think they're really playing a very risky game.
And obviously, as Mychal said, there's an economic component to this. There's money to be had from television contracts and so on and so forth. So I don't know. I'm probably grateful that I don't have to make those decisions. I probably know the decision I'd make, but you know, we'll see where it goes and how it goes and what happens. You know, generally, I think, and again, I don't know all the sides to it, and I'll be the first to say that. But generally, football and basketball are the economic drivers in an athletic department. And so can you go a season without that money and maintain your program at the viable level where it was? And that answer is probably no, just from an economic standpoint. From an economic standpoint, I think you got the standpoint of the individual kids, and then you've got the health issue, and which probably should override everything, but probably won't. So, how about the NBA not playing? Anybody's got that caused a little bit of a stir. And Barbara, what do you think?
Well, you know, again, I agree with these guys being concerned about not playing right now. There's a lot at risk and a lot at stake. So I think they'd make the right decision not to play.
Let me just say something about my understanding of Black Lives Matter. It's not about the flag. It's not about any of that stuff. It's about, in my opinion, it's about the relationship over the years between the police departments and, in particular, Black men. Now, some Black women, certainly with Breonna Taylor. And the number of people who've been shot and killed in situations where it certainly seems as though and looks as though it never should have escalated to that level of violence. That's what I've always understood Black Lives Matter to be about. And where it has the other interpretations, in my opinion, are pretty much political. Mychal?
Well, Thom, I'd like to comment on that. And you're exactly right. The kneeling was never against the flag or against the military. It was to draw attention to the fact of social injustice. You know, and a lot of people that like sports say, well, this is not the place for that. My answer is, what is the place? Back in the civil rights days, people criticized Dr. Martin Luther King for his marching and his protests and said he should not have done it that way. What would have been the alternative had he not done that or taken those actions? Look at where we are today from the standpoint of voting rights and other opportunities that were a result of that. The other narrative that is being stolen here, or changed, maybe I should say, as far as Black Lives Matter, there are a lot of people that are changing the narrative or interpreting that to mean that people that are in support of Black Lives Matter is putting Black lives above all other lives.
Right.
And I had a conversation with somebody. I said, that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is our lives matter as well. And we should be taking in account for the fact that we have suffered so many injustices. The other narrative that's being changed is the issue about law and order. And I told somebody, I said, everybody wants law and order.
Sure.
We all do. I said, but what we do want and what we're concerned about is the law being implemented, applied, and administrated equally, unilaterally, uniformly across the board to all people. Just this morning, I was reading an article about the Breonna Taylor situation. And the gentleman that they were actually in pursuit of say that Breonna Taylor was part of a drug syndicate organized process going on. In exchange for him testifying to that fact, he was going to get away with probation and leniency. He turned it down. Don't know how true the article is, but I find it very interesting.
Barbara?
Yeah, I mean, it's really sickening to see this has all turned out to be. You know, we've got people, you know, they're making their own narrative. They're trying to say Black Lives Matter is a organization that's all about hate and injustice on the opposite side, which is not true. You know, Black Lives Matter from our standpoint is not an organization. It's human rights. It's all about, you know, making sure that people are treated equally and justice is unilaterally across the board. And so people are trying to make it their own thing. Maybe whether they're reading that in the media, hearing it on TV, I'm not sure. But just looking at some media comments and people talking about Black Lives Matter and how to them it means that no other lives matter, and certainly that's not what it's all about.
I think if we go back to the history, and we should never forget the history of our country. When somebody was lynched, and God knows we know how many people were lynched, primarily Black men, it was always in a mob setting. And to me, one of the things that social media allows is to generate a mob mentality. You say something that is, in my opinion, belittling, demeaning about somebody, or something. You know, you would think President Obama was still the president because they're always throwing him in there. And then you get this mob mentality that likes or says things that most of the time aren't true. You mentioned Martin Luther King. If you go back to Dr. King, who we now celebrate and say was one of our great heroes, and we have a holiday for him. Dr. King was hated. He was hated. The night before he was killed, he had death threats. When they got on the plane in Atlanta to go to Memphis, they had to get everybody off the plane and go through the plane because they'd gotten all these bomb threats. So it wasn't like he was this celebrated man in his lifetime. And so I think we get away from fact and get away from what actually happened in history when we start creating all these alternative narratives. And it's so easy today to create an alternative narrative through social media. Everybody has an opinion.
Right.
Everybody can broadcast or publicize their opinion. You know, everybody is a star, I always say. Any other comments on that before we leave it and go and talk with Big D?
Yes, Thom, you started the conversation about the NBA players and playing. You notice I have my towel here. This is in tribute to John Thompson.
Yes.
And he had a lot of NBA players that he coached and some Hall of Famers like Patrick Ewing and what have you.
Allen Iverson.
What's interesting is that John Thompson, the players that stayed with his program in Georgetown for the full 4 years, had a graduation rate of 97%.
There you go.
Okay. Allen Iverson said John Thompson saved his life. And in his office, he had a deflated basketball to show that life and other things were more important than basketball, because at some point, the air would go out of the ball.
That's a great point, Mike.
I would like to just commend the NBA players, and I know a lot of people, here we go with that narrative, were upset because they boycotted as a result of the shooting of Jacob Blake. What I want to commend them on is the fact that when they boycotted, they didn't say anything inflammatory or what have you. They had meetings amongst themselves, and it involved the owners and the coaches. They came out with a plan. There was action as a result of the boycott. And one of the things is that all the NBA arenas are now going to be polling places for people to go and vote. That's an action item as a result of the boycott. And I would encourage people that before you start throwing people under the bus, wait and find out all the true facts, and then make your comment or your decision. The NBA is back. They realize that by playing, it gives them a platform to continue to speak out for those that do not have a voice. To me, they're using it in a positive way.
I want to echo that a little further and say, and it may be helpful if you want to know factual news without the emotion, that perhaps you watch NPR and the public news that basically delivers the news without the emotion. Because you can talk about one issue, and if you're on Fox, you're going to get one point of view, and if you're on CNN, you're going to get another. And somewhere in between that are the facts. And so to me, you have to educate yourself on what the facts are, what the story's behind. John Thompson is another one who was vilified. The man graduated 97% of his players. And when we talk about will they play today, are we talking about, we should be asking, will they continue to go to class? And if they don't play, can they use this time to maybe further and get ahead in their studies? Barbara, would you like to close us out before I wrap this up and we go to Big D?
I think you've all said everything you can say about this, Thom. This is, I agree totally.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you guys, man. I appreciate it. I appreciate you guys' preparation for this. I need to do a little bit. I need to do one commercial, and that commercial is for Best Girl, which is our company that sponsors and putting on this show. Best Girl team members consult with Fortune 500 companies, utilities, higher education institutions, small businesses, and associations. We work with our clients to promote communication, motivation, teamwork, and leadership. Team members speak on topics such as education, inclusion, and diversity, leadership, management, and more throughout the country. We provide customized leadership, access and inclusion, public relations, and organizational consulting services. We partner with business and education clients to promote organizational effectiveness, motivation, and leadership. Our customized consulting services include strategic planning, corporate communications, executive coaching, fundraising, and economic development. Look us up at bestgirl.com, our website, and I think you'll be intrigued. So we're going to move on to our next segment now. It's called Everybody is a Star. I've got an interview with my friend Daryl, Big D, Braden. Big D has written a book, Identity Crisis, Finding the Strength Within My Struggle. Daryl A. Braden. Big D, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you, Thom. I appreciate you inviting me, man. It's definitely an honor and a privilege, man. I'm humble and excited to see you, man. God, it's been some years.
It has been a while. We go back a few decades, actually, but I hadn't seen you in maybe at least a decade or somewhere like that. So tell me, why'd you decide to write this book?
Well, Thom, you know, from knowing me all these years, first let me say, Thom has been an important part of my life for a long time. He probably might not remember this, but he wrote an article about me the second time I attempted to go back to school. And he had loaned me a bicycle because I didn't have a car to pedal back and forth to campus for classes. And in the article, he would say, keep pedaling, Big D. And there was... And I had no idea at the time that all the other stuff that I would have to go through before I actually obtained my degree. But God placed this vision in my heart and in my mind a little more than 10 years ago to write this book, to tell my story for several reasons. The most important reason was to point the readers to Christ. The second most important reason was as a precautionary tale to student athletes to not find their identity in the things that they do, because I wanted them to understand that they were much more than just basketball players. So, you know, it's amazing that I started writing it during the pandemic. If you can recall the conversation we had, and I kept asking you, Thom, I want to write a book. I want to write a book. I mean, what should I do? And you will always say the same thing. Big D, just start writing. And one day that's what I did. And once I started writing, the Holy Spirit took over until it was finished.
You were on the first basketball team at UAB. You and George Jones were the first three recruits. You guys started the program. I remember UAB and those of us who had gone to other schools but who lived in Birmingham or were for Birmingham felt like you guys were Birmingham's team. What was that like starting the program?
Well, it was an amazing experience. It was very humbling. And sometimes it was humiliating. But I mean, the thing that a lot of people don't realize is that we had transferred in from major Division I programs. I was coming from TCU, and Larry and George were coming from Baylor, both in the old Southwest Conference, and we were used to the best of everything. We had no idea what the experience would be like sitting out at a program that didn't have a program. A lot of people don't realize that when we went there, we were not told a lot of the difficulties that we were going to face. We didn't even have a place to eat. for 6 months. We ate hamburger helper every day. We didn't have a team to practice. We didn't have a arena. We didn't even have a weight room. I mean, it was very difficult. And I think that really that's disheartening for me is that the university has never even recognized us or never even took the time to say, to acknowledge the fact that we were the first three Blazers. You know, they don't even have a picture of us anywhere in the arena, which is, I mean, I don't even have the words to say about that. But me, Larry, and George, we sacrificed our careers to help put UAB on the map. And the seeds we planted became the fruit of what you see now.
And you guys you did start a program. I want to go back. You're from Memphis, Tennessee. And I want you to talk about, you played a long time in Europe, and you'd always tell me you played before kings and queens. But before you do that, you said, how tall are you?
About 6'9".
You said you were 5'9" in the 9th grade, and by the time you were in the 12th grade, you were 6'8".
That's right. That's right. Amazing. That drove my mother crazy because she had to buy my clothes.
What a growth spurt. Okay, I'm gonna go. So you leave. You're one of the top basketball players in the country. You go to TCU. Your very first game, you got 27 points, 21 rebounds, 4 blocks. And in the first semester, you were in the top 10 in scoring, rebounding, and block shots in the NCAA. Well, I mean, what a start to your career, man.
Yeah, it was a wonderful start. And everything was happening so fast. And, you know, I talk about this a little bit in the book. I think not having the information that's necessary to be successful is something that can derail a career. Because I was so talented, I thought I had a voice, and actually I didn't. And I would never forget, it was a time in the dressing room I spoke out about something that was happening with the team, and the coach did his best to demean me, to belittle me, but he had no idea the confidence that I had in my ability. The only thing it did was made me bitter, and bitterness combined with talent and confidence was an amazing thing. So, but yeah, I was having a great season. I was on my way to probably being a first round pick in the NBA.
And you ended up with 4 schools in 5 years.
Yeah, knucklehead.
Tell us about that.
See, my freshman year, coming out of high school, I didn't have a lot of offers. You know, I was still developing into the player that I would eventually become. So the coach from Melrose High School, Coach Verdi Sales, got me a scholarship at East Central University in Ada, Oklahoma. That was my freshman year. I was there for a semester, and then I transferred to a junior college in Poto, Oklahoma, called Carl Albert Junior College, where my talent really began to shine through. We had a very successful team. I became a junior college All-American, and I probably could have went anywhere. I was basically recruited by all the schools in the Southwest Conference, the Big Ten. I had offers, man, everywhere. It was unbelievable. But, you know, I didn't have the proper guidance to make an intelligent decision. You know, my parents never went to college. So when I come to them for advice, you know, I'll never forget my mother saying, well, baby, wherever you want to go, we're going to support you. And that's cool. She gave me the best she had, but, you know, I needed more. And that's what the book is about, a precautionary tale for these student athletes and their parents to make proper decisions by getting all the information that you can, not only about the school, but about the coaches that you're about to play for. So I chose TCU for a reason which wasn't very smart. I should have went to the University of Houston and played with Otis Birdsong. But you know, it's like that Stevie Wonder song said, when you think you're in it and you're not of it. I think God was directing me where he wanted me to be to get me to the place that I am now.
And you ended up then at UAB.
Right.
And tell us about, and I know the difficulties of it, but tell us from the basketball perspective what that was like.
Well, the summer when I was transferring from TCU, I was seeking a school because I had 1 year left. I needed a school where I could make an impact because of all the baggage that I had, all the negative baggage that I had. So it was during that summer that Coach Bartow, and we knew him from Memphis. Coach Bartow was an icon. He was like a basketball god. My senior year in high school, he led Memphis to the NCAA finals against UCLA, a team led by Larry Finch, Ronnie Robinson, and Larry Keenan. And during that time, I was playing in the summer league in Memphis, and it came up that Coach Bartow was going to Birmingham, Alabama to start a basketball program. And he was taking Coach Finch with him. So now, all of a sudden, Coach Finch started coming around. Coach Bartow wants you at UAB. Now, if you look at a guy like me from Memphis, from North Memphis, and to have Coach Bartow and Coach Finch come to my home in Hyde Park in North Memphis was incredible, man. So I figured the opportunity to play for Coach Bartow with 1 year left would put my career right where I needed to be. But like I said, not having all the information, I did not know that I would not be able, because we were a first year team, we would not be able for postseason play. But I think the influence that me, Larry, and George had on the team that first year with all the young guys coming in, we had a young freshman named Oliver Robinson that we embraced and we mentored and we tutored, who eventually went on to take UAB to some heights after 4 years. That was incredible. We started a program with nothing, and in 4 years, they were in the Elite Eight.
Tell me about playing in Europe. Did you really play before Kings and Queens?
Yes, I did. I mean, playing in Europe was an incredible experience for me. I always viewed it as a paid European vacation because, number one, it was basketball, and I could do that well. But the most important lesson that I learned was adapting to the culture. I saw so many guys come and were always comparing this to America, and they get disillusioned, and a couple of weeks later, they on their way home because they homesick. I took it upon myself to embrace the culture, and I got in with the culture, and I got in where I fit in, is what they say. And I had a ball, man. I got to see the world, man. And for a guy with my background, from, like I said, from Hyde Park in North Memphis, I wasn't supposed to do none of this stuff. I mean, I tell a story in the book about being in the ninth grade. My most embarrassing moment in basketball when my coach picked me up off the floor and carried me to the sideline because I was watching my teammates battle on the basket. I'll never forget what he told me. He said, if that's all you're going to do, they can play better with 4. And, and I cried that day. I mean, I was embarrassed. My teammates left. And I vowed from that day that would never happen to me again. So playing in Europe was incredible.
I want to go to maybe one more thing. You had some. I think some pictures with George Gerd, which had to be some kind of experience. But I want to talk a little bit because you were not too far after me, and there was the unwritten rule in college in that day that you could only have so many black players on the floor at one time. And I used to say that if you walked into the gym and you were watching the game and there were 2 black guys on the floor for your team, it was a normal game. If there was 3, then it was a tight game. If there were 4 black players out there, you were way behind. You were trying to catch up.
Coach's job was on the line. But yeah, and that was I mean, just not having the information and the knowledge that it was needed to go to a school like TCU, because I had no idea that it was an unwritten rule that's how many black players could start at home and how many black players could start on the road. I always thought that you put your best team on the court to win. You know, I always thought that that's the way it was, you know, and to find out that it wasn't that was I mean, it was a hell of an experience for me, but I survived it, you know. I'm glad I got a chance to see that. And that's why I tell these young athletes now, because there's so much they don't know and they think they do. And that's another reason why I wrote the book. I want them to understand that there's so much more than basketball players.
There are a lot of life lessons in the book as well. And one of them is that you fell into drugs, and you don't shy away from that. You don't shy away from talking about it. You've been in recovery for years, and you've done very, very well. And I'm really proud of you. You want to talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah, well, like I said in the book, you know, I always did drugs. I mean, I'm not bragging about it. I'm not proud of it, but I smoked my first joint when I was in 11th grade, and I snorted my first line of cocaine the year I was sitting out at UAB. But because I was so arrogant and I never wanted to do anything that would keep me from performing at a high level, I never let the drugs take over my career. You know, it wasn't until my basketball career ended. I played until I was 40, and then one day the phone stopped ringing. And now, as I explained in the book, I got an insatiable hole I got to try to fill. So I tried to fill that hole with drugs and alcohol, and I became a drug addict. I was addicted to crack cocaine for 10 years. I was homeless. I did a little over 3 years in prison, and through it all, God delivered me and protected me. And on the 28th of this month, I will be celebrating 17 years of sobriety.
Wow. It's I think I knew you as you were kind of going in and out of that. I didn't know the prison part till I actually read the book. But you know, we've all been through our things, and it's just so wonderful to see you on this side of it and where you're going. So tell people, where can they get the book?
Well, you can contact me. My email address is Daryl with one R, Daryl, Braden, Braden at yahoo.com. And I can give you all the information. I'm just getting started with this. So I'm taking payments through Cash App and through checks or money order in the mail. I'm very diligent. Once I get your payment, your book is in the mail the same day, if it's in time for the post office to still be open. God is doing an amazing thing with this book, Thom. I've sold 500 plus copies in less than a month. I just had to order another 500 book. I'm getting a lot of positive response from the book. So I'm basically trying to get the book to the athletes, to middle school, high school, and college athletes. Oliver Robinson did an amazing thing when I was in Birmingham. He purchased 15 books and donated them to the UAB men's basketball program.
Oh, great.
And then another friend of mine from Birmingham, who's also a UAB alumni, Dwayne Bishop, purchased the same number of books for the women's basketball program. And Steve and Stephanie Mychal, you know Steve, they purchased 75 books for the men's program. So that's my hope. I'm hoping I can get into these colleges, get these colleges, these coaches interested in purchasing the book for their student athletes to really, as a precautionary tale, to just let them know that, I mean, your identity is not in basketball. Your identity is in Christ. And if you're not educated and you're not a person with good character, then it doesn't matter how good of a basketball player or athlete you are. Success is going to be fleeting.
Let me ask you one last thing, and we touched on this earlier in the earlier segment. You had a couple of, I always say I got drafted to the NFL, and people always say, well, I had a cup of coffee. I said, well, I had 2 cups. So you had a couple of cups yourself in the NBA. What did you think about the guys sitting out the game last week and not playing Black Lives Matter?
Well, I commend the guys because it follows into what I've been saying all the time. I mean, basketball is just something we do. You know, it's not who we are. You know, and being a professional athlete, that's why I commend LeBron for, you know, he's not my favorite player, but I commend him for the things that he uses his black basketball platform to accomplish. And I think that's a wonderful thing. I mean, I heard Magic Johnson say this years ago that the basketball gives the players a forum to voice their opinions about issues, social issues or whatever. So the fact that they're using that to you know, to have a commentary about what's going on in the world, I think that's great. I mean, sometimes we need to stop and take a look back at what's really going on. You know, that's what the pandemic is all about. God is just calling us to be still and know that He's God and He's in control. So yeah, I commend them for doing that.
Okay, well, Big D, man, you know it's always good to talk to you, and I'm so proud of you because you did. You called me up and you said, "Thom, I'm thinking about writing this book. Thinking about writing. What should I do?" And one day I said, "Well, just start writing. Write something every day."
I did.
And you did, man, and I'm just so proud of you. And it's great to see you. One of my favorites. And,
thank you, man. I love you, Thom.
Love you, buddy. All right, appreciate it. Here, thank
Bye-bye.
you. All
Thank
right.
you.
All right. Well, we're going to move on now as we're coming to a close of today's show. I want to, we've talked a little bit about Black Lives Matter. And again, I just want to emphasize that to me, that has always been about the relationship with the police. And particularly over the past years, that has not been a good relationship. And I can tell you from personal experience. When Ahmaud Arbery was killed over in Georgia, black man was killed by two men who felt they had the right to do that. I wrote a piece, I posted it on our website, and it was called The Talk. And so I'm going to read a little bit from that piece. I remember the talk that black fathers gave and probably still give to their sons. It was time. I was probably getting closer to driver's license age, and that meant I could venture further from the nest on my own. And the talk was serious. Now, it wasn't a sex talk. We had that one too. But this talk was far more serious. It was the survival talk. How to survive an incident with the Birmingham police or a gang of angry whites. What had stayed with me all these years was my dad's concern. There was a threat out there, and there was nothing my dad could do about it but pass down lessons that I could call on when needed. He told me, keep your hands visible at all times. Do whatever they tell you. Don't make any sudden moves. Call home as soon as you can. Now, fortunately, as a teen in the 1960s in my hometown of Birmingham, Alabama, I steered clear of the police and angry white people. We lived in a nice little neighborhood near the Birmingham airport, and it was the kind of neighborhood where we, my friends and I, could hang out at night under the streetlight and talk and laugh until it was time to go into our respective homes. It was a great place to grow up. We lived in the county, and every now and then, the sheriff first, we ran. We got out of eyesight. We would meet back up later when he was gone. And I told that to my wife many years later. She grew up differently. And she immediately asked, well, why did you run? And I said, because it was the police. We weren't doing anything wrong. It was just best to avoid an encounter if you could. On a couple of occasions, when the officer drove up on us before we could run, without looking suspicious, he'd stop and ask us what we were doing. Or he'd tell us to get our hands out of our pockets. We would always comply. He was never mean, but we never felt like he was there, quote, to protect and serve us. It was more like he was there to keep us in line. So those feelings have stayed with me far into my adulthood. I've had some encounters. I've kept my hands visible. I've responded yes, sir, and no, sir, to young men in uniform half my age. On one occasion, I sat in the front seat of the friendly police officer's car on the Alabama bypass and explained how my wife's Prius hybrid I was driving ran on both gas and a battery and where he could purchase one. I had an officer flip the little safety thing on his holster and put his hand on his gun as we faced each other about 15 yards apart on Interstate I-85 coming out of Montgomery, Alabama one night. We were both scared. I could tell he was scared of me, although I did nothing to raise his fear. His fear made me afraid of him. I raised my hands in the sky like it was in a Western movie. And I explained what I was doing, where I worked, and a bunch of other unnecessary information. I had 2 police officers in an unmarked car stop me for speeding, and I was heading into Atlanta. They were not in uniform and in an unmarked sports car. From their look, they could have been undercover. I was driving a new white Mercedes, and it stood out. I explained to them that I was an actor and that I was late for an audition, and that obviously didn't go over too well because they proceeded to have me get out of the car. They searched my car. They went through my glove compartment. They looked under my seats. They made me open the trunk. They searched the trunk. When I asked them what they were looking for, they just ignored me and continued their search. They never threatened me, but it was scary. I said, I don't have any weapons or drugs. And later I asked, how do I know that you won't plant some drugs in my car? They didn't respond. They didn't find anything. They got back into their vehicle and they sped off. I took a deep breath and wondered what the hell had just happened. Later in life, I gave the talk to my teen son one night before he went out after he had started to drive. And because this was 30 years later than my talk with my dad and the world had moderated somewhat, it was of less significance to him. His teen world was a more diverse world than mine had been. He assured me that he would not be doing anything wrong or get into any trouble. I replied, it's not you I'm worried about, son. A month ago, I wrote this 2 or 3 months ago, but a month ago, when the news broke that Ahmaud Arbery, young black man, was gunned down vigilante style by 2 white men in Georgia who felt they had that right. My now adult son, living in Georgia with his own family, called and expressed his concern for the temperament of the country and his own safety. He felt the need to be better able to protect himself and his family. It was time for us to have another talk. That's going to be our show. Let me wrap up here and thank our sponsor, Best Girl. I want to thank all of you who tuned in with us. We appreciate it. We will be back next Tuesday, and the show will repeat between now and next week on our Best Girl Facebook page and on our Best Girl YouTube channel. I'd like to thank all of you. I want to thank Emily Hedrick. Emily produces the show for us and just does a wonderful job. Thank you, Emily. I want to thank Mychal Walker, Barbara Wallace, Edwards, and I want to thank my man, Big D. I'd like to also thank Jones and Company for letting us borrow 30 seconds of their music. And the song is called Going Coastal. And I want to mention Michael D. Atunao, and I hope I pronounced it right. I probably didn't, but I apologize for the artwork that was used in the talk. Thank you very much. We look to see you again next Tuesday for Tuesdays with Thom. Peace.